Power isn't about the fear you strike into enemies. It's about how you protect those who gave you life. Daniele Parisi ruled Milan's underworld with an iron fist, yet in a room of arrogant billionaires, he stood paralyzed by high society's politics. When vicious elites decided to publicly shatter his fragile mother, Ilaria, for a cruel laugh, the most feared man in Italy froze. True courage, however, doesn't wear a designer suit. It wears a uniform. Today, a poor maid was about to teach a mafia boss the true meaning of power. The air inside the Palazzo Cerbalone was thick with the scent of white truffles, expensive champagne, and centuries-old entitlement. Beneath the sprawling crystal chandeliers, the elite of Milan gathered, a sea of bespoke tuxedos and haute couture gowns. For Daniele Parisi, however, the opulent ballroom felt more like a prison than a place of celebration. At 34, Daniele was a man composed of sharp angles and cold calculation. He had inherited a sprawling criminal empire from his late father, a ruthless Sicilian boss who had built a fortune in blood and shadows. But Daniele was a different breed. He possessed the intellect of a chess grandmaster and the vision of a corporate titan. Tonight was the culmination of a 5-year master plan, the signing of a multi-billion-euro legitimate real estate syndicate. If successful, it would wash the Parisi name clean forever, transitioning his family from the dangerous underworld into the untouchable upper echelons of legitimate global commerce. Yet, as he scanned the room, his piercing dark eyes weren't looking at the politicians or the bankers. They were fixed on a small, fragile woman sitting alone at a velvet-draped table near the terrace doors. Ilaria Parisi, his mother, once a fierce, resilient woman who had scrubbed floors in Palermo to ensure Daniele never went hungry before his father's violent rise to power, Ilaria was now a ghost of her former self. The early stages of dementia had begun to unravel her mind. She wore a stunning, understated black gown, but her hands trembled as she clutched a silver spoon, her eyes darting around the grand hall with childlike confusion. Daniele had brought her tonight because he couldn't bear to leave her alone at the estate, but in this den of societal wolves, he knew she was a target. Across the room, navigating the labyrinth of arrogant guests, was Sophia Conti. At 24, Sophia's youth was heavily masked by dark circles of exhaustion under her eyes and the stiff, restrictive black and white uniform of a catering maid. Her feet throbbed in cheap, sensible shoes. She carried a silver tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres, weaving silently through the crowd, practically invisible to the billionaires around her. Sophia wasn't here out of ambition. She was here out of desperation. Her younger brother, Matteo, was lying in a hospital bed across the city, requiring experimental treatments for a rare heart defect that the National Health Service wouldn't cover. Every euro Sophia earned, every agonizing double shift she worked, went directly to the hospital's billing department. She had long ago abandoned her dreams of studying literature at the university. Survival had become her only curriculum. As Sophia approached the terrace doors to serve a group of laughing socialites, she noticed the older woman sitting alone. Ilaria looked terrified. A waiter rushed past, nearly clipping Ilaria's shoulder, and the old woman flinched, dropping her silk napkin. Without hesitation, Sophia paused, balanced her heavy tray on one hand, and gracefully swooped down to retrieve the napkin. "Here you go, signora," Sophia whispered, in soft, gentle Italian, placing it back on the table with a warm, reassuring smile. Ilaria looked up, her clouded eyes focusing on the maid's kind face. "Thank you, my dear," Ilaria murmured, her voice trembling. "It's very loud in here." "The music. It's too loud." "It is," Sophia agreed softly, breaking the cardinal rule of the catering company. Never converse with the guests. But the garden outside is very quiet. Perhaps later, you can look at the stars. For a fleeting second, the terror left Ilaria's face, replaced by a genuine, maternal warmth. From across the vast room, Daniele witnessed this tiny, silent interaction. His jaw tightened. He didn't know who the maid was, but in a room filled with monsters disguised as aristocrats, she was the first person to treat his mother like a human being. However, the fragile peace was about to be shattered. Descending the grand staircase like a bird of prey was Eleanor Viscanti. The Visconti family traced their lineage back to the Renaissance, and Eleanor, a woman in her late 40s with sharp aristocratic features and a heart made of ice, despised the new money infiltrating her city. She despised the Parisi family most of all. Knowing rumors of Daniele's criminal past, she viewed their presence tonight as an insult to her heritage. Eleanor's cold eyes locked onto Ilaria, sitting alone. A malicious, predatory smile curved her lips. She signaled to her wealthy sycophants, and like a pack of wolves sensing a wounded lamb, they began to glide across the marble floor toward the isolated, confused old woman. The true test of Daniele Parisi's restraint was about to begin. The string quartet was playing a lively Vivaldi piece, but to Daniele, the music suddenly sounded like a funeral dirge. He saw Eleanor Visconti making her move. He immediately excused himself from a conversation with the Minister of Finance, his long strides eating up the distance across the ballroom, but the dense crowd of socialites and businessmen created a labyrinth that slowed him down. Well, Eleanor's shrill, carrying voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. She stopped directly in front of Ilaria's table, flanked by 3 equally haughty women. If it isn't the Parisi matriarch, I must admit, I am shocked to see you here, Ilaria. I was under the impression they were strictly enforcing the guest list tonight. Ilaria blinked, shrinking back into her velvet chair. My son brought me, she stammered, her hands gripping the edges of the table. Her mind, already struggling to anchor itself in reality, began to slip under the sudden aggression. Your son, Eleanor sneered, taking a deliberate step closer. Yes, the infamous Daniele, trying to buy his way into civilization. Tell me, Ilaria, is it difficult pretending to be a lady? Does the stench of the Palermo gutters ever truly wash off, no matter how much expensive perfume you bathe in? A few of the surrounding guests stopped their conversations, turning to watch the spectacle. Cruel smirks appeared on the faces of the old money elite. Please, Ilaria whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I don't understand. Of course you don't, Eleanor laughed loudly, ensuring the surrounding tables could hear. Because a peasant dressed in silk is still a peasant. You don't belong here. You and your thug of a son are a disease to this city. In a deliberate, theatrical gesture, Eleanor reached out to grab a glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray. But as she did, she intentionally knocked her arm against Ilaria's trembling hand, which was holding a plate of delicate pastries. The plate shattered violently on the marble floor, and the red wine splashed across Eleanor's own pristine white gown, as well as onto Ilaria's dress. Look what you've done, you senile old fool, Eleanor shrieked, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. The music ground to a halt. The entire ballroom fell completely, terrifyingly silent. Daniele broke through the crowd, stopping just 10 feet away. His heart hammered against his ribs like a sledgehammer. The instinct bred into him by his father screamed at him to draw the customized beretta hidden beneath his tuxedo jacket, to shatter Eleanor Visconti's jaw, to drag her out by her hair, and make her an example to the entire city of Milan. The Mafia boss within him demanded blood for this ultimate disrespect. But as his hands balled into fists, his eyes met the terrified gaze of the Minister of Finance and the international investors standing nearby. The deal, the billion-euro contract that would save his family from the violent cycle of the underworld. If he acted like the monster they believed him to be, the contracts would be torn up tonight. He would be arrested, his legitimate empire ruined, and his mother would be left entirely vulnerable to the state. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. She was baiting him. She wanted the thug to reveal himself in front of the world. Are you completely out of your mind? Eleanor continued to scream at the weeping Ilaria. You belong in an asylum, not a palace. Look at my dress. You ignorant, disgusting. Daniele took a step forward, his vision turning red, prepared to sacrifice his entire future to protect his mother. But before Daniele could speak, a figure in black and white stepped between the towering aristocrat and the trembling mother. Sophia Conti placed her silver tray on the table with a definitive, ringing clack. Signora Visconti, I must sincerely apologize, Sophia's voice rang out, clear, calm and unwavering. Eleanor blinked, taken aback by the sudden barrier. "Who are you? Get out of my way, servant." Sophia did not move. She stood tall, her posture immaculate, shielding Ilaria completely from Eleonora's view. "It was my fault entirely, Signora," Sophia lied loudly, her voice projecting with theatrical precision. "I was improperly balancing the tray, and I tripped, knocking into Signora Parisi's arm. The fault is solely mine." "Signora Parisi is completely blameless," the crowd murmured. Daniele froze in his tracks, staring in absolute shock at the young maid's back. "You?" Eleanor scoffed, her face turning crimson with rage as her narrative was dismantled. "You clumsy idiot! Do you know how much this dress costs? It's worth more than your miserable life." "I am acutely aware of my own insignificance, Signora," Sophia replied with devastating politeness, her tone devoid of fear or subservience. "However, I was also taught that true elegance is defined by how one handles an accident, not by the price tag of the fabric that was stained." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Several of the younger aristocrats had to cover their mouths to hide their smiles. The sheer audacity of a caterer lecturing the head of the Viscanti family on elegance was unprecedented. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Eleanor hissed, stepping forward as if to strike the maid. Sophia held her ground, her eyes locking onto Eleanor's, with the fiery resilience of someone who battled life and death stakes every day. "I will fetch club soda for your dress immediately, Signora, and I will personally pay for the dry cleaning from my wages. But I respectfully ask that you do not raise your voice at an elderly guest who did absolutely nothing wrong. It is unbecoming of your esteemed lineage." Checkmate. Sophia had weaponized Eleanor's own aristocratic pride against her. If Eleanor continued to scream, she proved the maid right. She was acting like a classless brute. If she backed down, she surrendered to a servant. Eleanor trembled with fury. She looked around, realizing the room's sympathy had shifted entirely to the stoic maid and the weeping old woman. Stripped of her power in front of her peers, Eleanor sneered, turned on her heel, and stormed out of the ballroom, her sycophants trailing nervously behind her. The silence in the ballroom lingered for only a few seconds before the low hum of conversation resumed, the guests eager to gossip about the Visconti humiliation. The string quartet, taking a cue from the frantic event coordinator, hastily struck up a lively Mozart piece to restore the ambiance. Daniele Parisi exhaled a breath he felt he had been holding for an eternity. The murderous rage slowly drained from his veins, replaced by a profound sense of awe. He watched as the young maid immediately dropped to her knees, ignoring the ruined Visconti dress, and began to carefully pick up the shards of the broken pastry plate with her bare hands. He stepped forward, his imposing shadow falling over her. "Stop," he commanded softly. Sophia flinched slightly, expecting a reprimand from a guest, but continued gathering the porcelain. "It's all right, Signor. I need to clear this before someone steps on," I said. "Stop." Daniele knelt down right there on the marble floor, completely uncaring that the knees of his €5,000 suit were soaking up spilled red wine. He reached out and gently grasped Sophia's wrist. Her hands were shaking. A tiny shard of glass had nicked her thumb, and a drop of blood was welling up. Sophia looked up into the dark, intense eyes of Daniele Parisi. She recognized him from the evening's briefing. The host, the billionaire, the rumored criminal. "You are bleeding," Daniele said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded absolute authority, yet held an unexpected gentleness. He pulled a pristine silk handkerchief from his breast pocket and carefully wrapped it around her thumb. "It's nothing, Signor," Sophia whispered, her heart racing. She tried to pull her hand away, intimidated by his overwhelming presence, but his grip was firm. "It is not nothing," Daniele corrected her. He looked past her to his mother. Ilaria was no longer crying. She was staring at Sophia with a look of profound gratitude. Daniel stood up, offering his hand to Sophia. Hesitantly, she took it, and he pulled her effortlessly to her feet. "Why did you do that?" Daniele asked, his eyes searching hers, looking for the angle, the manipulation. In his world, no one risked themselves for nothing. "Do what, Signor?" "Take the blame." Invite the wrath of a woman who could destroy your livelihood with a single phone call. You didn't spill that wine. My mother did not spill that wine. It was a deliberate attack. Sophia looked down, adjusting her stained apron. In my experience, Signor, people like her only attack those they believe cannot defend themselves. Your mother, she looked like she needed a shield. It was just a dress. People matter more than fabric. Daniele felt a strange tightness in his chest. People matter more than fabric. It was a sentiment completely foreign to the cutthroat underworld and the vicious corporate boardrooms he navigated. Before he could speak again, a red-faced man in a tight suit, the catering manager, stormed over. You! The manager hissed at Sophia, practically spitting. What in God's name is wrong with you? Insulting Signora Viscanti? You are fired. Get out of this palazzo immediately, and don't expect to be paid for tonight. Sophia's face went pale, the fire in her eyes extinguished instantly, replaced by sheer panic. Please, Signor Rossi, you can't. I need this shift. My brother. Out! The manager barked, pointing toward the servants' exit. Sophia swallowed hard, tears finally brimming in her eyes. She bowed her head, turned, and began to quickly walk away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The manager turned to Daniele, a sickeningly sweet, apologetic smile plastered on his face. Signor Parisi, I am so incredibly sorry for the behavior of that girl. I assure you, my company prides itself on invisible, silent service. Daniele's eyes never left Sophia's retreating figure. Your company, Daniele said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper that made the manager's blood run cold, is dismissed. All of you, pack your equipment and leave my property within the hour. If a single one of your staff is still in this building by midnight, I will personally see to it that you never work in this country again. The manager's jaw dropped. But Signor, the gala is over for you, Daniele snapped. He signaled to Lorenzo Ricci, his sharply dressed underboss who had just materialized from the crowd. Lorenzo, escort this man and his crew to the service elevators. See that my mother is taken safely to the penthouse. Consider it done, boss. Lorenzo nodded smoothly. Daniele adjusted his cuffs, his mind made up. He turned and walked purposefully toward the servants' exit, following the path the brave, foolish maid had taken. The service alley behind Palazzo Cerbalone was a stark contrast to the opulence inside. It smelled of damp brick, exhaust, and rotting food from the nearby high-end restaurants. The cold night air bit through Sophia's thin cotton uniform as she leaned against the brick wall, weeping silently into her hands. She had failed. The bravado that had fueled her in the ballroom had completely evaporated, leaving behind the crushing reality of her situation. She needed the 300 euros from tonight's shift to pay for Matteo's respiratory medication tomorrow. Without it, he would suffer. Her pride had cost her brother his comfort, perhaps his life. The heavy metal security door groaned open, spilling a rectangular patch of golden light into the dark alley. Sophia quickly wiped her eyes, expecting the manager to come and hurl more abuse. Instead, the towering silhouette of Daniele Parisi stepped out into the cold. He didn't look like a billionaire host anymore. He looked like a predator entering his natural habitat. The shadows of the alley seemed to cling to him. He walked slowly toward her. In his hand, he held the ruined white apron she had discarded in the locker room. You left this, Daniele said quietly. Throw it away. Sophia choked out, turning her face to hide her tears. I won't be needing it anymore. Daniele leaned against the brick wall opposite her, pulling a silver cigarette case from his pocket. He offered her one, but she shook her head. He lit one for himself, the flare of the lighter illuminating the sharp angles of his jaw and the jagged old scar running along his neck, a brutal reminder of his past. I ran a background check on you while walking down here, Daniele said, exhaling a plume of smoke. Sophia Conti, 24, no criminal record. Top of your class in literature at the University of Milan until you dropped out 2 years ago. Heavy debts. Medical debts. Sophia's head snapped up, anger momentarily overriding her despair. Is that what powerful men do? Dig into the tragedies of the poor for entertainment? No, Daniele replied evenly. It's what careful men do when they encounter someone who defies their expectations. Who is the medical debt for, Sophia? She hesitated, her jaw clenched. But the sheer exhaustion in her bones broke her resistance. My younger brother, Matteo, he has a congenital heart defect. The treatments are expensive. The state hospital can't provide the level of care he needs. Without private treatment, his heart will just give out. Daniela absorbed this silently. He looked at the girl, really looked at her. In a world where loyalty was bought with blood and money, this girl had thrown herself in front of a firing squad to protect a stranger, knowing it would cost her everything. My mother, Ilaria, Daniele began, his voice softening. She wasn't born into this wealth. She grew up in the dirt of Palermo. She used to clean the houses of the rich. They treated her like a dog. When my father made his money, he moved her here, thinking it would make her happy. But the people in that ballroom, they are worse than the thugs in the streets. They kill with words, with humiliation. He took a final drag of his cigarette and crushed it under his leather shoe. She is suffering from dementia. Her mind is a fragmented mirror. I am building an empire to legitimize my family, to make us untouchable. But in the process, I am failing to protect the one person who matters most. When Eleanor Viscanti attacked her tonight, I couldn't move. If I reacted, I would have proven them right. I would have destroyed my family's future. Daniele stepped closer, closing the distance between them. You did what I could not do, Sophia. You protected my mother's dignity. And for that, I owe you a debt. Sophia shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I am a Parisi, Daniele interrupted, his voice laced with absolute certainty. I always pay my debts. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black checkbook and a fountain pen. He quickly wrote a number, signed it, and held it out to her. Sophia looked at the check. Her eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't for 300 euros, it was for 50,000 euros. I can't take this, she gasped, backing away. This is charity. I work for my money. A rare, genuine smile tugged at the corner of Daniela's mouth. It isn't charity, it's a signing bonus. A signing bonus? For what? For your new job, Daniele stated. You are no longer a caterer. You are coming to work at my estate. You will be the personal companion and caretaker for my mother. She needs someone with a strong spine and a kind heart. Someone who isn't intimidated by wealth or power. In exchange, I will clear all of your brother's medical debts, move him into the finest private cardiac wing in Europe, and pay you a salary that will allow you to return to the university. Sophia stared at him, her mind spinning. It was a Faustian bargain. She knew the rumors about the Parisi family. Working for a mafia boss, even a supposedly reformed one, was dangerous. But the image of Matteo lying pale in the hospital bed flashed in her mind. Why? Sophia whispered. Why go to all this trouble for a maid? Because, Daniele said, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce, unwavering intensity. Loyalty like yours cannot be bought, Sophia. It can only be earned. And I intend to earn it. Do we have a deal? Slowly, with trembling fingers, Sophia reached out and took the check. 6 months passed, and the Parisi estate, a sprawling, fortified villa on the outskirts of Lake Como, had transformed under Sophia's presence. She was not treated as a servant. Daniela had given her a suite of rooms in the East Wing, and her primary duty was simply to be with Ilaria. The change in the older woman was miraculous. Sophia read poetry to her, walked with her through the extensive rose gardens, and patiently guided her through her moments of confusion. For the first time in years, the Parisi villa was filled with genuine laughter, not just the tense whispers of capos and lawyers. Matteo was thriving in a private clinic in Switzerland. As for Daniele, the ice around his heart had begun to thaw. He found himself returning from the city earlier each day, drawn not to his office, but to the gardens to watch Sophia and his mother. He admired Sophia's sharp intellect, her unapologetic honesty, and the way she challenged him. She was not afraid to tell the most dangerous man in Milan when he was wrong. An unspoken, profound connection had blossomed between them, a bridge between two entirely different worlds. However, peace in the Parisi world was an illusion. Eleanor Viscanti had never forgiven the public humiliation she suffered at the gala. Furthermore, Daniele's legitimate real estate syndicate had successfully launched, effectively stripping the Viscanti family of several prime municipal contracts. Eleanor's pride and her bank accounts were bleeding. Driven by venomous spite, she decided that if she couldn't beat Daniele in the boardroom, she would drag him back into the bloody gutter he came from. Eleanor secretly allied herself with Carlo Moretti, the ruthless head of a rival faction from Naples, who had long coveted the Parisi territory in Milan. Moretti was a butcher, a man of the old ways. Together, they plotted a coordinated strike, assassinate Daniele's top lieutenants, and frame the Parisi family for a massive shipment of illegal arms, triggering a government raid that would dismantle Daniele's legitimate empire and send him to prison forever. The plot was entirely secret, discussed only in the deepest shadows. But arrogance is the mother of all mistakes. One crisp Tuesday afternoon, Sophia was in Milan running a personal errand for Ilaria, picking up a specific brand of artisanal Sicilian honey from a high-end specialty market near the Duomo. The shop was crowded. As Sophia waited at the counter, she noticed two men in expensive but flashy suits standing near the imported wines. One was Lorenzo Ricci, Daniele's underboss, but the man he was speaking to was unknown to her. Wait, no. She looked closer. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was a man named Fabiano, a mid-level captain in Daniele's organization, whom Sophia had seen at the villa. Fabiano looked nervous, sweating profusely. "Moretti is moving tomorrow night at the docks," Fabiano whispered to the other man, unaware that Sophia, hidden behind a display of olive oil, could hear him. "Visconti is paying off the customs officials. They're planting the crates in Parisi's warehouse. As soon as the shipment is in, the police are raiding. Daniele's finished. I just need to make sure my crew is clear. Visconti guarantees your safety if you keep Daniele blind," the other man sneered. "Just keep smiling at the boss until the cuffs are on him." Sophia's blood ran ice cold, a betrayal from within. A setup orchestrated by the woman she had humiliated months ago. If this plot succeeded, everything Daniele had built, the safety of his mother, the life she and Matteo now enjoyed it, would all be destroyed. She abandoned the honey, slipped out of the store unnoticed, and practically sprinted to the train station. She didn't call Daniele's phone. She knew from living at the villa that phones could be compromised. She had to tell him face to face. When Sophia burst into Daniele's private study at the villa 2 hours later, he was in the middle of a meeting with his corporate lawyers. He took one look at her pale, terrified face, immediately dismissed the lawyers, and locked the oak doors. "What happened?" he demanded, rushing to her side. "Is it my mother? Is it Matteo?" "No," Sophia gasped, trying to catch her breath. "It's you, Daniele. They are coming for you. Tomorrow night." She relayed everything she had heard at the market. Every word, every name. Fabiano's betrayal, Moretti's weapons, Eleanor Viscanti's masterstroke. Daniele's face hardened into a mask of pure, terrifying granite. The civilized businessman vanished, and the Mafia boss returned to the surface. He walked over to his desk, poured 2 fingers of whiskey, and drank it in silence. "I should have cut Eleanor Viscanti's throat the night she insulted my mother," Daniele whispered, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. "I tried to play by their rules. I tried to be civilized, and this is how they repay me." Lorenzo. Within seconds, Lorenzo Ricci was in the room. "Assemble the men," Daniele ordered, his eyes dead and cold. "We are going to war. Find Fabiano, take him to the basement, and get a team ready to hit Moretti's compound tonight. We burn them to the ground before they even touch the docks." "Yes, boss," Lorenzo nodded grimly, turning to leave. "No!" Sophia shouted, stepping between Daniele and the door. Daniele looked at her, his patience dangerously thin. "Sophia, step aside. This is not your world. You have done your part. I will handle this." "By proving them right?" Sophia challenged, her voice trembling but her gaze defiant. "If you go to war, If you start killing people in the streets, you become exactly what Eleanor Viscanti told the world you are. A thug. A criminal. You lose everything you built. You lose your legitimacy. If I do nothing, I lose my freedom and my life. Daniele roared, slamming his fist on the desk. They are planting weapons in my warehouse, Sophia. The police will lock me away for 50 years. My mother will die alone. Then beat them. Sophia pleaded, stepping closer to him, grabbing his lapels. Beat them, but do it differently. You are smarter than Moretti. You are smarter than Visconti. Use the brain that built a €1 billion empire, not the gun that your father gave you. Destroy them in the light, Daniele. Not in the dark. Daniele stared down into Sophia's desperate, pleading eyes. He saw the pure, uncorrupted morality that had drawn him to her. She was fighting for his soul, just as fiercely as she had fought for his mother's dignity. The heavy silence in the study was deafening. Slowly, the murderous tension in Daniele's shoulders relaxed. He placed his large hands over hers. Lorenzo, Daniele said softly, without looking away from Sophia. Yes, boss. Stand the hitmen down. Call the corporate accountants. And call the chief of police. Tell him I have a gift for him. Daniele finally smiled, a cold, brilliant, terrifying smile of a true chess master. We are going to do exactly what Sophia said. We are going to destroy them in the light. The next evening, Eleanor Viscanti was hosting a private, exclusive dinner party at her palatial estate. The champagne was flowing, and she was in exceptionally high spirits. By midnight, she expected the news to break. Daniele Parisi arrested, his empire seized, the new money scum eradicated from Milan. She raised her crystal glass to toast her guests. To the preservation of our beloved city. To tradition, the aristocrats echoed. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the dining room swung open. The room fell silent. Daniele Parisi walked in. He wasn't flanked by armed thugs. He was flanked by 2 highly respected corporate attorneys and the chief of police of Milan. And walking confidently by his side, wearing a stunning, elegant emerald dress that commanded absolute respect, was Sophia Conti. Eleanor's face drained of color. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor, a poetic echo of the gala months ago. What is the meaning of this? How did you get past my security? Get out of my house. Daniele smiled, a predator holding all the cards. Good evening, Eleanor. I apologize for the interruption, but there has been a slight change of plans regarding tonight's activities. He gestured to the chief of police, who stepped forward holding a thick folder. Signora Visconti, the chief said sternly, we have just seized a massive shipment of illegal firearms at the southern docks. Eleanor's eyes darted frantically. I know nothing about that. That belongs to the Parisi syndicate. Arrest him. Actually, Daniele interjected smoothly, pulling a flash drive from his pocket and tossing it onto the dining table. The shipment was intercepted at a warehouse leased under a shell corporation owned by your holding company, Eleanor. We also have recorded confessions from your intermediary, Fabiano, detailing your wire transfers to Carlo Moretti to orchestrate this frame-up. The money trail leads directly to your offshore accounts. Eleanor gasped, clutching her chest. Lies. This is a setup. You framed me. No, Daniele said, stepping closer to the table, his presence dominating the room. You framed yourself. I simply let you walk into your own trap. Furthermore, my lawyers have spent the last 12 hours aggressively buying up the debt of your failing estates. As of 5 p.m. today, the Parisi conglomerate is the majority stakeholder in Visconti Holdings. You are bankrupt, Eleanor. Your name, your fortune, your legacy, they belong to me. The aristocrats at the table stared in absolute horror. The mighty Visconti family had been dismantled without a single shot being fired. Daniele looked at the broken woman before him. He could have ended her life. He could have stooped to her level of barbarism. But he thought of his mother, safely asleep at the villa. He thought of the young woman standing beside him, who had shown him the strength of grace. You called my mother a peasant, Daniele said, his voice quiet but echoing like thunder in the silent room. You called me a thug. But today, The thug bought your kingdom legally, and the peasant's companion outsmarted your master plan. You are finished in this city. Chief, she's all yours. As the police officers moved in to handcuff the screaming, hysterical Eleanor Viscanti, Daniele turned his back on her. He offered his arm to Sophia. Shall we go home? He asked gently. Sophia looked at the chaotic scene, then up at the man who had just rewritten his own destiny. She smiled, taking his arm. Yes. Ilaria will be waiting for us. They walked out of the Visconti estate, leaving the ruins of the arrogant elite behind them. Daniele had won his war, but more importantly, he had won the battle for his own soul. He had proven that true power wasn't found in violence or inherited titles, but in the courage to evolve, the wisdom to listen, and the strength to protect those you love with dignity. A year later, the Parisi Empire was a beacon of legitimate industry in Italy. The dark shadows of Daniele's past were finally washed away. Ilaria lived her remaining days in peace and joy, surrounded by the beautiful gardens of the estate. And Sophia, having graduated with honors, didn't leave the villa. She stayed, no longer a maid, no longer a debtor, but as the formidable, beloved partner of Daniele Parisi, ruling their new world together with compassion and unbreakable strength.